Let's get started with our topic, cybersecurity for the software-defined vehicle. So I'm Moritz Minzlaff. I'm leading the professional security services at ETAS with a focus on managing the portfolio and the business models, with a background of 20 plus years in cybersecurity, a lot of that in the automotive industry, helping OEMs and suppliers worldwide. And I'm also quite involved in the topic of cyber maturity, organizing an annual survey that we do at ETAS industry-wide on automotive cyber maturity. Michael.
Thanks. My name is Michael Lukey. I'm with ETAS since 2016, and I have 20 plus years experience in software development practices, program management in that context, also outside the automotive industry. So I'm bringing in a glimpse from the outside world here. As I said, since 2016, I'm supporting and helping ETAS to secure the automotive business. So let's get started.
Let's get started. And you said a glimpse from the outside world, and that's a good lead into our next slide, because speed is one of the main themes that we have in this presentation today. Speed is going to be crucial for cybersecurity for the software-defined vehicle. And we're going to bring an analog or a metaphor from hockey, one of the fastest games you can find. And in hockey, we want to bring or highlight two things that happened over the years. Some things, the game changed. So one way the game changed was that in the late 1920s, they allowed forward passing. Before that, people were not allowed to pass forward, but only backward or to the side. So they changed the rules. Okay, the rules changed. What happened? It doubled the goals per game scored. It had a drastic impact on the game, right? Very different game then. Double number of goals per game. They did further changes. For example, you see the lines here that segment the field, the blue and the red lines. And you can see here that segment the hockey field. And later they allowed two-line passes. Before that, you couldn't cross the puck or shoot the puck across two lines. So it was forbidden. And later they allowed it. And what resulted here, the change was that it increased the speed of the game substantially. Right, so we had rule changes, we had barriers, lines that were broken, that were blurred, and we're bringing this picture because something similar is happening with the software-defined vehicle now, with the introduction of software or the focus of software in automotive. The software-defined vehicle challenges boundaries, our blue and red lines that we have in our minds. It challenges boundaries and mindsets. How so? Well, if you look at this and you look at the data flows in the automotive ecosystem, well, in the past we looked a lot at the car itself, right? And all the data flows happening inside CAN bus and so on, and different parts of the bus and the onboard network that you have. But this has changed, right? So we have connected vehicles. We have communication to a smart grid for electric vehicles. We have communication to infrastructure. We have the ODB port, smart devices. Oh, and we've got another layer out here. We've got cars talking to backends from the OEM, from suppliers, from third parties. We've got the development centers being connected to all of this in various ways. We've got the production connected to this. We've got repair shops. We've got open source software projects. So we've got also, let's say, a segmentation of our own blue and red lines. And as you can see, we also have our two-line passes now. We've got data flows going across all these different parts. So we've got a very complex ecosystem now. And software has changed how we need to think about security in this way. So we need to think about security in all these different parts because they are connected. And we do this sometimes as, let's say, an exercise to get started with OEMs and suppliers that we support to figure out all the data flows of all crucial data they have with a picture like this, with a taxonomy like this. And it can be very enlightening to realize, oh, I've got the data flow from here to here, and I need to do some protection here and there. I think Michael is going to bring some examples of what can happen when we don't do this. And what's the result? Yeah, so I showed the results in the hockey picture, but also in automotive security, we see results of this blurring the lines and the forward passing and so on. We've seen increases in attacks. So these are numbers from some of the recent years and how attacks on relevant parts of the automotive ecosystem have increased. On manufacturing, a rise within 1 or 2 years of plus 300% a number of attacks, plus 300%. Similarly, on vehicles, in a matter of 3 to 4 years, plus 225%, more than double, yeah, in just a short number of years. Plus 50% on corporate networks. I think this is probably coming from a higher level already, the attacks on corporate networks. So also still rising, 50% in 1 to 2 years. And unsurprisingly, companies, also manufacturing and automotive companies, rank cybersecurity now one of the top 5 business risks. So it's not just a technical thing, right? It's right up there with all the issues we have in the automotive industry and all the challenges, supply chain, semiconductor, and so on. We have cybersecurity as one of the top 5 business risks. Okay. And to understand this risk and to give some further detail to this, I'm going to hand over to Michael.
Okay, thanks, Moritz. I think the numbers are quite impressive, right? When you look at them, this is not just an increasing amount by the ordinary numbers, it's really significant. But when we want to understand how big the impact really is, we also need to look at not only the numbers in increasing of attacks, we also need to understand in which way, so how these attacks are changing, because they are changing. And here I brought 2 different types of attacks that should outline the differences that we see coming. And actually they are real, so they happened already. So this is reality. The first one was identified or outlined by Sam Curry, and he was actually able to make it short to utilize web interfaces that exist as ordinary web interface or normal web interface of an OEM in the internet to actually access not only customer data, but source code and even build chains. So by just breaking in using more or less standard weak techniques to break in such systems, he was able to access the source code of OEMs and their suppliers. And now you can say, okay, why is this important? And that brings me to the second attack. Here you can see how actually hackers used a so-called supply chain attack to introduce malicious source code into a source code basis of a well-known company, SolarWinds. They had their Orion network monitoring software. And by actually introducing and injecting their code into the source code basis of the SolarWinds company, SolarWinds itself distributed this malicious software to their customers without even knowing. And SolarWinds monitoring software really was used in a wider space with a lot of customers, and they all got infected, and software was used to actually install a backdoor. So why is that? When you look at the landscape that is changing for the software-defined vehicle, then you can easily understand the change as a transition towards what's called smartphone on wheels, but it's also more like a laptop on wheels. So it's a sophisticated computer that comes with all the aspects that you would see here on the left-hand side, right? It's constant connectivity, and with that comes malware exposure. Behind that is a third-party ecosystem that is not under full control by just a single instance. You have a significant increase in speed of software delivery and a lot of continuous updates on all the different bits and pieces that this car is now made of. Okay, and keep this in mind. Just imagine that for a minute. So this is partly already reality for today's cars, but it will intensify for the software-defined vehicle. So it will become even more. You will have more connectivity, more malware exposure, and so on. And with all this more, you also have different types of underlying mechanisms that need to be considered. Yeah, so you have the vehicle computer that not only comes with a CAN bus only anymore, it comes with more maybe IP-based communication in future. You have the cloud infrastructure that is connected to it. It comes with a whole lot of new development effort in different languages, different systems. Think about Docker environments and new languages used in that context. You would usually not find any Python script in an ECU, and that is more belonging to the background environment. But still, if there is a vulnerability in Python and you can expose that and exploit that, and you can use it in order to introduce code into a malware environment, into an environment, and create and put your malware there, right? So this is just, well, these are just some aspects that we can think of. And to try to actually visualize this system that we were talking about, a software environment we are talking about, you can imagine a cube. Yeah, and the cube actually represents the software that is used within that system. And it's spanning across along the ecosystem, the supply chain, and the life cycle of the whole system. That means the back end, the car itself, and of course, whatever else comes into this context, right? So the ecosystem is constantly growing, and growth is one important aspect that needs to be considered. So when you look at the surface that is shown here already as a text surface, then it should remind you that for such a huge system, a perimeter protection only is not sufficient. This will not safeguard against intrusions or whatsoever. It is one important aspect, not saying that it's not important, but it is not the only one that will help. You just cannot protect the whole space because it's not under your control. Yeah? With the supply chain in the back end, where third-party people doing things in source code that you have no control over, then yeah, that makes it difficult to actually control all the space. So how do we deal with this then? And one element that I want to highlight here is that a significant increase of speed, the pace that needs to be increased in software development and fixing and patching is one key here. And good software development practices on their own are a good start, but I'm not only talking about B-model or ASPICE. These are excellent development models. But even with these models in mind, you cannot avoid or you cannot prevent that bugs are making it into systems like the backend. So the B model itself may apply to some of the back-end areas, but not to all of them. ASPICE for sure not. And so you have this ecosystem that is constructed out of these different pieces. And at the end, it turns out that patching the systems is the only way how you can keep them secure over time. Yeah, and the faster you can do that, the higher the speed is in which you can deploy a security fix or patch into your system, the better you are protected against rising zero-day exploits, for example. So this speed is the essence of actually making systems secure in the future. And now you're asking, okay, we have the change in the ecosystem, we have the change in the domain, and how the car is actually using computer to control the steering environment and the braking environments, and this is creating a total mixture of functionality over time. So how do we deal with this? The one aspect that also helps in this context is that the communication between the different boundaries inside the company and inside the ecosystem has to improve. It's an essential key because as the architecture changes in the car, also the communication inside the companies and across the companies needs to change. Because when you do not have an aligned patching strategy, for example, you can easily be exploited just because one of your partner has been exploited. And that requires a good communication that outlines how important this is to have an aligned patching strategy, or to align on deployment scenarios where you are sure that your supplier can support you in the rollout and at the right point in time. And this becomes even more important when you think of the setup of the system on a chip architecture. So because what we will see in cars is system on a chip architectures. And yes, I'm still talking about the attack surface, right? So this is still part of the attack surface story. So SoCs are a significant shift from traditional domain controllers. And the integration of functionality within these systems lead to an aspect that can have safety and general purpose functionality running next to each other. So what you want to avoid under all circumstances is that in a trusted execution environment, somebody sneaks in because somebody has injected code in a source code repository in Lightning environment software. Yeah. However, with zero-day exploits at the other end, you cannot avoid this. And again, speed is the only solution that helps you to fix this issue once you attack it, once you identify it. So it shows how critical it can actually be to have this setup fully implemented along the whole supply chain to make the whole system on a chip architecture secure. And since the software context is constantly growing, there is no whatsoever default procedure that you can apply. You have to utilize principles. You have to be sure that you really understand how to implement the different ways to protect within the software space that is shown here. And that can happen gradually. It can happen step by step. And one key, for example, that can help to understand how this works is things like zero trust. Yeah, so along with speed, you can come up with zero trust. But as I said, the main drivers behind that are principles. And the principles that can help you to actually solve this problem are principles that Moritz can show us, because he very well knows all of them.
Thanks, Michael. I will continue from here. And you mentioned already a couple of many points that I will refer to in reuse. So I'll talk about 4 principles for SDV level cyber maturity. So we've seen, Michael, you've talked a lot about the changes, and you've shown how EE architectures develop, how the technology changes, but let's say the technology landscape becomes larger. Yeah. The traditional one or the classical one doesn't go away. It's still needed, it's still relevant, but new ones are added, new programming languages, and so on. So we look at 4 established security principles, but on a new maturity level. Okay, and I'm going to share a slide where we have 4 principles here on the left-hand side, and then on different maturity levels. So before I go into the details, I want to share how we created this, or how we distilled this. So the 4 principles are very well established. I'll introduce them in a minute. They should not be new to someone working in security and focusing on that. But what is new is that you have different levels now, and you see them here in 2 parts. Level 1, 2, 3. This is, let's say, pre-SDV, where most organizations lived, let's say, at this maturity level, and then we have a higher one. This is based on our project experience that we have in supporting OEMs and suppliers worldwide as ETAS in security, in the security journey. It's also informed by the survey that I mentioned at the beginning that we run at ETAS annually. So this is based on on statistics and on our observation, where the industry is and what is needed. So let's look at the 4 principles one by one. So we have security by design, by which we mean a focus, not exclusively, but a lot on process, right? On how to implement security by design, not by accident, not afterwards, not bolting it on, but by design. Let's say pre-SDV, the established way was to have the V model, Michael, you mentioned it, and to enhance it with security-specific artifacts, with the goal to establish a certain target security level at a specific point in time, typically start of production, SOP. We know that fairly well in the industry. We've mastered this as an industry as a whole quite well. But you see the recurring theme that we have here in our talk today, that with the SDV, with software, speed is of essence, and repairing and restoring the target security level. So what's needed now for security by design on an SDV level maturity is to have this DevSecOps cycle that Michael introduced with all these security additions to optimize mean time to repair and restore, because security will not stay fixed. There is always the possibility and the potential for some 0 days, some not yet discovered vulnerabilities that become exploited. So this is going to be of essence to repair and restore the target security level, and to have the necessary processes for that. The second principle, also not new for people in security, defense in depth. So not building in security just one place, but a multi-layered strategy. Here, you could say it's a focus mostly on technology. Again, not exclusively. There are some overlaps between the principles. Actually, they are only really effective if they go hand in hand, right? So this is what we see here. Great processes, but not the right technology, not the right people will not get you there, and vice versa. Okay, focus on technology. So pre-SDV, focus onboard, product-centric view. We had this with these concentric circles on one of the previous slides. We looked a lot on the vehicle, how to secure onboard networks, onboard ECUs, and so on. But as the attacks that Michael showed demonstrate, is that we need an ecosystem level, onboard and offboard, and we need a zero trust approach across vehicle computers and vehicle clouds. Risk management and monitoring, focus on information, if you will. Third principle, pre-SDV, incident-driven, reactive risk management. So we did our threat and risk analysis, our TARA, and now we need to go to a continuous TARA, continuous risk management. Again, optimizing mean time to detect security events, mean time to detect, and then, of course, eventually repair and restore at the target security level. So continuous monitoring instead of a incident-driven reactive stance in doing, I need to update my tab. The final one, last but not least, organizational security, focus on people and culture, right? The best technology, the best processes, the best information will not help you if the culture is lacking and there is a focus on, I did my part, we need to deliver, but don't care about security. So pre-SDV, maybe a checklist or a starting point for many in the security journey is a checklist mentality. And I don't mean this in a too negative way. It's a good place to start, right? So you get started if you don't do security at all. What are things to cover? And it's a checklist mentality, compliance is in focus, but it's not adequate anymore in the age of almost constantly changing security landscape. So here we need a security mindset, incorporating all stakeholders. Michael, you said it earlier. It's we need to have a good common understanding in the organizations. So we're running the survey, and it sometimes showed that the perception of what the biggest risks and the top challenges are very different if you talk to subject matter experts and to the top management. And the point here is not that either one of them is necessarily inherently right or has the better view, but to move forward, we need to incorporate these views, right? We need to incorporate the views, get to an aligned understanding, what are the biggest challenges, how to tackle them. And this includes the software supply chain. Right, so the best maturity, the best culture in your own organization, it's great, but will not be sufficient if in your supply chain it's lacking. So we need to talk to them as well. We need to engage them as well. And I want to focus on that aspect a little more with one slide and give one example that we've seen in projects. I've basically seen most of these in some discussions personally with some automotive OEMs and then departments and suppliers, and it shows the different viewpoints and how much different they can be. So personally, I also have a technical background. So I can understand that from maybe an R&D perspective, we often see a lack of security by design or maybe a lack of defense in depth because we say, hey, why don't we do encryption here and there? Of course, this is a good perspective. It's a valid perspective. It's the right perspective. But if you talk to a legal person, it's very different. They talk about product liability. Very different picture, very different solutions, right? If you talk to someone in human resources, I'm going to go back to a cybersecurity culture. They look at this and say, hey, in this organization, our security culture is not yet strong enough. After sales, yet another picture. They say, hey, I get all these customer complaints. We need to do something here. Yeah, so very different perspectives, and we need all of these stakeholders to move forward security and get to an adequate maturity level. Some stats from the survey that I like to bring. So this is from the latest edition, the 2023 edition. We did this in the Q1 of this year. And Michael, you showed this DevSecOps cycle. And this is, as I said, backed up by data. So we did the survey and we can split the participants into organizations that self-reported as, let's say, starting maturity and high maturity. And now we're looking at some of the differences, how they responded to two particular questions. One question is why these organizations do security. What's their main driver? And I'm going to show some percentages, which is the difference from going from initial maturity to high maturity. Protection of new business models as the main driver, up 156%. Protection of road users, up 132%. Resilience and business continuity, up 59%. Remember what I said about checklist mentality. So initial maturity, you start maybe with a checklist, with a compliance view. But if you look at these main drivers for high maturity organizations, you see it points beyond the own organization. It points to business models, road users, protection of them. It points to business continuity. It points beyond security. Yeah, DevOps. This is why the DevOps is here in the middle. Yeah, resilience and business continuity. So a much more holistic, let's say, view and understanding at high maturity. And we see this reflected in another question. We see this in the data here as well, where we asked about the metrics used to measure cybersecurity. We gave a range of different answers, I think 6 to 10 different answers. And I'm going to pick the ones where we saw the biggest gap again, going from foundational initial maturity to high maturity organizations. And what do we see here? Using the number of critical cybersecurity events as a metric to measure cybersecurity, up 71%, right? That goes directly into what we said about using mean time to detect, mean time to repair as one of the main things to focus on. Mean time to detect and repair, up 65%, so these two are related. And also, personally, I'm quite happy to see budget for cybersecurity is going down. If you go to more advanced stages, I would argue that this is a very crude measure. How much you spend on cybersecurity, you need to spend it well. Yeah, you need to spend it well with the right focus, with the right mentality, with the right metrics, and then you can move forward. So how can your team, your organization, how can we in the industry reach this SDV level cyber maturity? Let's talk about that for a couple of minutes. So first point I want to make is that it's an individual journey, right? So we've seen this matrix of principles and different maturity levels, but it's not the case that all organizations need to be at the very right end of level 5 or not necessarily at a certain point in time, I don't know, next year or so. And also where organizations start is quite different. And it might be different for each of the principles. Some might be strong, very strong, and have very good culture, but lack in maybe technology or vice versa. And we see this also in the survey that we did, where we saw that, for example, small organizations are sometimes more nimble and more quicker to adopt CI/CD and DevOps principles, but large organizations are reporting process maturity less of a challenge, because they've got large QM departments, they can roll out the process, they're quite used to that. So organizations start at different places. So it pays to take stock of where your own organization is, to also have a discussion on where the target is, what should you reach in the first step, and then of course execute a gap closure program, tackling things one by one. How can you do it? How do we do it? How do we support customers? So there are some underlying aspects to consider. If you want to facilitate such a discussion about your status quo in your organization and the target state, I want to bring some of the aspects to consider that are really helpful to have a good and meaningful conversation. So if you look at the left-hand pillar here, you see the status quo. Some things to consider is, first of all, of course, internal factors, your own cyber maturity, looking at people, looking at process technology, each of these 3 dimensions, and getting an assessment here. Looking also, how does your organization currently engage with the ecosystem? How do you currently engage with your customers, your suppliers, and also horizontal in forums like the Auto ISAC or some other forums like this. And then, of course, we mentioned it, supply chain is also quite important. So it's important for the status quo and to identify the right measures. Where is your supply chain, right? Maybe this is one of the places where you can make the biggest jump ahead and the biggest progress. Also in how you select and steer your own suppliers. Then I'm going to go to the target state. Some aspects to consider here is, I'm going to start in the middle. It's your product, because this is closest to the product complexity and risk exposure. For example, how much connectivity does your product have? Michael had these different stages of EE architectures, of onboard vehicle architectures. How many vehicle computers are there? How many domains on board? What is happening in the cloud, where they're hosted. So the product complexity and risk exposure is one part that will inform on how mature you need to be. Brand positioning and risk aversion, of course, as well an aspect. Is your organization more a front runner of pushing out new features, or maybe more risk averse? This is something your organization needs to figure out. And that also influences the target state. And of course, the markets with certain compliance requirements, like the UNECE R155, like the GB and GBTs in China, like NHTSA best practices, and so on, of course, also influence what you need to do. And then you have, of course, some aspects that influence how well you can transition or how fast you can move. You've got product roadmaps with certain SOPs that influence how fast you need to move. You've got some organizational boundary conditions. It's not just security. The whole industry with moving towards software is changing. So there might be other change initiatives in your organizations that will influence on how fast you can move with security improvements, and of course some market situations and trends. What does it look like more in practice? So we've developed this approach with a maturity model that can measure in over 100 different aspects the maturity across all these 4 principles that I just mentioned, and across the 5 levels. The maturity of organization, it's a very thorough but yet very efficient and lean way to measure the current state and to do an initial stock taking. And then you have the target state. You have had this discussion and can say which profile you need to have, which level do you want to have on which principles. And out of this, you get a cyber maturity backlog, which you can then tackle one by one. And what we propose, also in the spirit of the DevOps mentality, is to pick a couple of things. You improve them, you get your processes defined, you get the technology you need, you get the training for the people you need. This is maybe the initiative you do first. you do some guided piloting to figure out, does it work well, right? So you take an example, you adopt a new threat and risk analysis tool to improve the maturity of how you do TARAs. You do some piloting and some actual projects. You find out, does it work well? Does it not work well? Does it play nice with your other tool, with your development tool chain, yes or no? And either you can say, okay, this is good and it's good to go, and you can start, collecting evidence for type approval for your customer and so on. Or you say this is not yet up to the target level, and you go back to the monitor. You do another delta assessment. You find out this is still in the backlog. Yeah. Another example is incident response. Yeah, so here maybe you define in a certain initiative processes and the team structure for incident response. Of course, to do guided piloting, you don't sit around and wait for an incident, but you can do a tabletop exercise, figure out if in a real simulated situation, people would know what to do, where to go, whom to call, are all the tools there, all the things clarified. If yes, great, you have your incident response up and running. If not, you go back and you refine. So this is a very very effective way to set up a cybersecurity management system and to increase your maturity step by step. And along the way, of course, I want to highlight that we have a number of services and software pieces out of the ITAR security portfolio that can play a role here. So you can judge at any of these initiatives, is this something that is helpful for me at the moment? We do have a TARA tooling. We do have an incident response team. So for example, you could say that while you set up your own incident response and it's not yet up and running, you get a retainer from us just in case. We do have software solutions to support your defense in depth principle, and are happy to support along the way around the whole DevOps cycle, wherever you are and wherever your pain point is or your focus point at the moment. And with this, I would like to close and open the stage for questions. But first, also mention this. This was an extract from our white paper. So if you enjoyed this, if what we talked about today made you curious and interested, please go to our website. You can scan the QR code here and find our full white paper, Cybersecurity for the Software-Defined Vehicle, with more details and more pointers to some further readings. And also, yes, please feel free to reach out to Michael and me after the call. Comments, feedback is always welcome. And now we're happy to hear your questions.